Good morning, and happy Father's Day. See, now you can do that one. You didn't know what to do for Mother's Day. You're like, happy and to you? No, not to you. So glad you guys are here. I'm Robert Kelly, one of the pastors here at the church, and we are we're continuing in our series called Letters. And we are hoping that you are finding it challenging and that we're encouraging you guys to continue along in your readings. If you're following along in the Own It readings, if you don't know what that is, talk to us afterwards and we'll get you up to speed on the Own It readings, and you'll know the area of this text that we're going to be studying in the upcoming week. And so that's what we've been doing for this whole series, in fact, for the whole year so far. A month or so ago, Leslie Binns was just 500 meters from the summit of Mount Everest. According to the newspaper articles, he abandoned his attempt to reach the peak in order to save another climber. Binns was preparing his final ascent when he saw Sunita Hazra sliding down toward him. She had lost her footing, became exhausted, and she was sliding down the mountain toward him. He catches her, stops her from continuing her slide down the mountain, and then helps her make the perilous descent back down to one of their base camps. In doing that, he gave up his chance to reach the summit. Why would he do this? Why would he do it? Save another life. Why? He loved her. He didn't know her. But he made a decision in that moment to do something that, unfortunately, many climbers of Mount Everest don't make. Lots of stories of climbers that say, you know what, I've spent a lot of money, I've spent a lot of time, I have been preparing for this, some for years. I am not going to miss my goal because someone else didn't prepare enough. Many people will leave other climbers as they continue to make their ascent, with a number of them dying each year. But Binns said no. In fact, later on when he was interviewed, he said that no summit is worth a life. A value decision that he has made because he instinctively knew to love. That was an amazing gift. Pop culture and literature, music, movies, advertising, they use the word love to mean just about everything that the Bible doesn't. There's a little bit of overlap, but most of the time they're talking about almost everything else, especially music. Almost all of the songs that you listen to, if you turn on the radio and you listen to kind of pop, music or rock or rap or whatever it might be, most of the songs are about romantic love. I mean, it's actually ridiculous how consistently true this is. How love has been given or taken or trampled upon, or the wreckage that remains after the heartache. This is the norm of the conversation. And if it's not about romantic love, then it's actually just about straight out sex. Unless you're listening to my country music playlist. That's a different thing altogether. My country music playlist, it's a lot more songs about like trucks and hunting and going to the beach. And so that's, I'll let you, if anybody wants it, I'll share my list. No, maybe I won't. So, but think about how we use this word, even the derivative of it, right? We talk about love, but we've made it into other forms, right? We talk about a lover. Or we even talk about how someone might make love. Right? We've tied it all. By the way, I really appreciate the feedback I got from last week, because I'm totally in support of the making love part. I'm not trying to trash that or anything. If you were here last week, you know. And I really appreciate the support, the encouragement you guys gave me from that message. It did lead to a few awkward conversations, but some really interesting ones as well. So, one interesting one from last week was we had some friends over, and so they were running late to get to the house, and so they called up, as you would, to call up and say, hey, we're running late. And so here was the voicemail message I got. He says, hey, man, I'm really sorry. Me and my wife, we're running late. Last week, we were just so convicted by your message. And we really took it to heart. So we're going to be about 20 minutes late. It's hilarious. But think about that, how we make these words. And now we think about it, we think about love really as a strong like. So we can love all sorts of different things. You can love your car, you can love your job, you can love that restaurant down the street until, of course, roaches are found in the kitchen. Then you don't love it anymore because, we're in and out of love like this on a regular basis because societal pressures and our own lack of biblical depth lead Christians to often have this idea that love is just a feeling, usually a strong feeling, but it is a feeling. To make matters even worse, few of us have actually experienced love in the way that the Bible describes it, which means that few of us have been able to practice love in the way that the Bible describes it. Consider the loneliness epidemic that's facing our country. Researchers tell us that we are feeling more and more isolated from each other, even though we're supposedly more and more connected. Albert Schweitzer, we're all so much together, but we are all dying of loneliness. Duke University, Arizona State University, conducted an extensive survey where they found out that 1/4 of respondents admitted that they had no one with whom they could talk about their personal troubles or successes. 25%. Now, when they factored out family members, so how many of you are connected to someone outside of your family where you could talk about your personal troubles and successes in an intentional and deep way, only half of the population said they had anyone. Half. National Academy of Sciences tell us that white, uneducated, middle and working class adults between the ages of 45 and 54 are now dying at higher rates than ever before. Deaths involving suicide, drug and alcohol abuse, and liver disease. Now, they said that the stresses of economic stagnation along with the increased availability of prescription painkillers were two of the key factors. But what I found interesting was their suggestion that it was the hopelessness and the helplessness of the social isolation, the breakdown, what they said, of a sense of meaning and purpose. These were the common threads in the people that were at increased risk. You can consider the reality that most men don't have significant friends. I mean, where is the bromance, gentlemen? Like, where? They say that for many men, as one psychologist put it, it is far and few between in relationships. For instance, when men hit their 30s, this is Dr. Todd Kashdan, when men hit their 30s, many cling to their high school and college friends. And if these don't last, men have a hard time forming new friendships. I'm not talking about workout partners and neighbors who pound a few beers with while ribs are grilling. I'm talking about confidants, people who you are willing to share your innermost self to because you feel it will be valued and accepted regardless of what evil lurks there. That is a remarkably biblical insight from a clinical psychologist. You can find similar problems, of course, in almost every demographic. We see these kinds of things among teenagers or commuter college students or people who are transplants. They move to a new neighborhood feeling disconnected. Military families or the vets who are returning from war or the elderly. You'll see report after report talking about some of these kinds of issues. We also can ask ourselves, how is it that love is supposed to manifest itself in an increasingly violent and polarized America? I mean, we see this every day now, the kind of difficult issues we are dealing with on a national level. Take the current political climate. What does love look like when we're talking about our politics? What does love look like when we're talking about the two idiots running for office right now? Now, some of you would say, it probably means you can't call them idiots. And you would be right. And so I'm reading this, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking, how is it that I'm so comfortable with the kinds of things that we're willing to say about the people that God says he is rising up into leadership in this country. Is that insanity? How does that impact our political conversations? Does love have anything to do with this? Or let's think about Orlando. A rough week for the U.S., no doubt. Yet another mass killing. How do we relate to our enemies? How do we relate to people who want to hurt us and murder our citizens? How? What kind of language are we supposed to use? What kind of options are we supposed to propose? What kind of solutions are we supposed to pursue? How do we treat and talk about the victims, who might very well differ from our moral convictions? How does that impact? Does love impact this conversation? You see, in every area of life, the idea of biblical love will come into play. In every relationship and in every interaction. And I think this means that we have to do a careful exploration of the biblical concept of love, because it will be vital for us to live the Christ life today. So open up, if you would, to 1 Corinthians 13. If you're doing the readings, I'm sure you figured out that's where we were heading this morning. 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. And in here, we're going to see that all that matters is love. All that matters is love. By way of background, the Corinthians, where Paul wrote this letter to the church in Corinth. These are Corinthians he's writing to. The Corinthians were pretty awesome people. I mean, they were a very sophisticated city. They were kind of an urban, suburban, highly educated, wealthy. They were professionally successful. They were talented in many ways. They pioneered a number of industries, and they were noted for their product launches, the things that they were able to release into the ancient world. In many ways, it sounds a lot like New York to me. You could even think in terms of the ancient world, as far as, Rome, the center of it all, the big city. And if New York is like Rome, then you could say that Nassau is like Corinth, filled with talented and highly educated people. I mean, it may as well be Mineola or Carle Place or Garden City. If you're in the Willistons or in New Hyde Park, you could look around and say, wow, we're doing pretty good. If you think about the kinds of people and the things that they're accomplishing and the companies that they run and the money that they're able to make, the careers that they're able to have, you think, they're pretty good people. They're pretty amazing by world standards. Really quite awesome. Now, the church in Corinth was also really quite awesome, spiritually speaking. I mean, Paul references a whole number of things that they were well known for. He talks about how gifted they were, how talented they were. They were hardworking, no doubt. I wouldn't be surprised if their little church in Corinth was making a difference in people's lives. It was impacting their society. Maybe even they were reaching out and doing some big initiatives to get the name of Christ out there. They were succeeding in creating a reputation for themselves. Does that sound familiar? I mean, a lot of these same things could be written about Beacon. The successes, of course, would change. We don't pride ourselves in tongues or healings and things like that. But we're awesome. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I think about all that we do and the kinds of things that we accomplish and the level of commitment that we have as a congregation and our desire to reach out to people who are far from God and let the name of Christ be known. The discipleship efforts and the small group stuff and the big projects and the events we run, throw for the community. I look around and I think, yeah, actually, we are pretty awesome. We're pretty awesome in a whole lot of these ways. Got a lot going for us, a lot more than a lot of others do. Paul tells them, starting in verse 1, none of this matters. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. He says none of it matters. without love. None of it. I mean, how is that possible? How is all of our accomplishing, all of our doing, all of our spiritual achievements, how can they mean nothing if we don't have love? It's easy for us to say, oh, I think maybe he's using a little hyperbole here. Maybe he's just exaggerating to prove his point because he really wants him to listen to what he's about to say. I don't think that's what's going on. I think he's actually getting at the heart of what really takes place in so many of us. He knows that it's easy for us to do all sorts of great things for all the wrong reasons. He knows that it's really possible that we try to do this or that so that others will think a certain way about us. He knows that many of our efforts can actually be self-centered in the end. And whether we were pursuing them in an openly self-centered way or we're doing them in a far more spiritual way, in the end it doesn't matter because your soul is still missing the essential element of love. You haven't grasped it. You haven't understood it. And Paul is trying to say, listen, I'm not saying that any of these things are bad things. I'm just saying that if you don't have the right motive, it isn't going to produce or do or result the way that you want it to or hope it does. It's possible that you'll stand before God one day and he'll say, but you did all of these things in my name, but you missed what mattered. You missed the only thing that ultimately mattered, love. So it sounds like we have got to get a grip on this love thing. Because love needs to mark all of our relationships and interactions. And this is where Paul now in verse 4 goes into this beautiful description. He says, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It doesn't boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. Always hopes. Always perseveres. It's beautiful, right? It's beautiful. I mean, this is why we take it out here and we put it on, like we paint it on wood signs, and why we put it on posters and we stick it in our room, right? And why on our walls. Because it's beautiful. As a standalone poem, it really is melodic. You can't, how can one not be moved when you simply reflect on these few limited verses? How do you not smile and feel warm when you're at a wedding and the pastor rips these verses out of their context and tries to tell a couple, this is what love is all about. These are the things that we hope you do. And everyone goes, oh, that's so sweet, such great wisdom from the ancient text. And it is true. All of those things are true. It's beautiful. It's great to use for weddings. But of course, you've been reading along with me in the Own It readings. You know that this isn't about marriage. He's not actually talking about marriage here. He's talking about the Christian call to love the world. And you also know that that's probably not how the Corinthians experienced it. They probably didn't go, oh, that's so sweet. Because it's not how it came to them. They didn't just get the poster. They didn't get the greeting card. So you kind of imagine for a moment how this all went down in Corinth. So a guy comes, storming into town, maybe, marching in and with a few buddies, and he says, hey, everyone, great news. Paul wrote a letter. So the church there hears about it, and they go, that's fantastic. So they run out and they gather up all the Christians, because no texting or anything. They find all of the Christians, and they go, hey, everyone, we got a letter from Paul. And they're like, great. So let's all gather at the church. So, they all gather up wherever they were meeting, probably someone's home. And they all gather up, and they say, all right, let's hear it. So they scroll it, I guess, unscroll the letter, and they start reading it out. And now, at first, it starts really nice. He welcomes them in chapter 1, and, I'm so glad I missed you guys, love you, you're awesome. But very quickly things turn around in this letter. And he starts really hammering them. He starts showing them all of the different things through chapter 2 and chapter 3, chapter 4, and all the ways that they have failed to love. In fact, if you work through this list, we did this week, you can find a violation of every one of these principles in these 4 verses in the first 12 chapters. He has just laid out for them how many ways that they have failed in doing the things that he says are essential to love. I don't think they would have been thinking, this is such a warm and sweet poem. I think they would have felt the conviction weighing down heavy upon them. In fact, I think the second time they read it through, they would have been even more hurt because they would have been hearing the language show up again and again. They would have realized that when he says, don't envy, it's because he just accused them of being envious. When he says to them, be patient, it's because he's shown them that they haven't been patient with each other. I think this would have weighed heavy upon the Corinthians. It's as if Paul was coming up alongside, let's say he and I were hanging out today, and he's like, hey, Robert, this morning I noticed when you were at the deli, and the guy failed to put the salt, pepper, ketchup on your egg sandwich, again, that you really seem to be impatient with it. You actually seem frustrated that he forgot salt, pepper, and ketchup. And I don't think that's very loving of you. And then he says, and yesterday, by the way, while we're thinking about it, you were in traffic and you made that decision. You should have went this way. You went this way. And then your light for gas came on. You realized you were going to be late to where you were going. You remember when you punched your steering wheel? Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, that you seemed very easily angered. That didn't seem very loving. Oh, and you know what else, Robert? And you're like, and finally, all right, stop already. We don't want to really do this. I don't know that I need to have that kind of level of examination or critique on all the ways that I have failed. And yet, how insightful it would be if we had it. So that's actually what we're going to do here. So take out your self-reflection exercise. Your self-reflection exercise. I'm taking some classes, and I'm trying to, become a better pastor and leader for whatever the next season of Beacon's development holds. And one of the things that really irritates me is that the teachers, they often like to ask questions. I want them to just tell me things, and they want us to think about things and apply things. I'm like, oh, brother. So that's what I'm going to make you guys do. Here we go. We're going to do a little exercise, a self-reflection exercise, and there's a simple framing of mind that is helpful for this exercise. Don't think in terms of simply your spouse, okay? That's not what this chapter is about primarily. Think of your spouse, but also think of your parents. Think of your kids. Think about your family, your friends, your coworkers. Think about your clients and your neighbors. Think about strangers. Think about immigrants. And think about political candidates. Think about those who disagree with your values. And think about those who want to hurt us. Think about all of these categories of people as we start to work through this self-reflection exercise. And as one person in the first service reminded me, think about yourself. Your own self-reflection on these sorts of ideas and values and how you treat yourself in relation to some of these as well. So what I'm going to do, the way this works is you get a pen. Hopefully you guys all have a pen. If you don't have a pen, just steal one from somebody who has a purse. And so grab a pen, and what you're going to do is I'm just going to read a couple of questions for each one. And as I read it, just write down what comes to mind. Write down the days, the ways in which you have not held that value of love in this particular way in some relationship or in some interaction. And just jot it down. Jot down as many as you can come up with in the few minutes that I'm going to give you. Now I'm going to read some questions, and I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds of silence to continue that reflection, and then I'm going to move on to the next one. All right, so that's how we're going to do the exercise. So here we go. Love is patient. That's the first. So you can ask yourself, are you? What would your kids say about you? Would they say you're patient? Would your spouse say that after you come home from a long day at work, that you're patient? Do you complain about all the slow people in the restaurant or in the store or on the road? If I were the person doing the speed limit in front of you on the freeway, what would I see? Would I think you're a patient person? Love is kind. Would the people on the subway or the Long Island Railroad say that about you? Would they say that you regularly think about others? You're quick to offer up your seat. You're ready to hold a door. Are you compassionate to those who are less fortunate, giving of yours for them? Are you gracious to those who disagree with you? When was the last time you stopped by to chat with that neighbor that's somewhat less popular in the neighborhood, on the street? Or maybe that coworker that others don't seem to like? Would they mark you as kind? It does not envy. So when someone gets the latest and the greatest, are you genuinely happy for them? And do you feel a little sad for yourself? You notice what the cool kids are wearing. Do you lament that you aren't? What are they wearing? What are they doing? Where are they going? What's their social life like? And do you get frustrated at your lack of those things? Do you get frustrated at you, or you get frustrated at your parents, or maybe your spouse for not allowing you? Or maybe you get frustrated at God for not giving you everything you need or you want. It does not boast. Do you find subtle ways to self-promote? It's easy to see the obvious ones, but the backdoor kinds of things. The way we set the stage and drop the hints to boast in the quieter ways. Are you the one-upper? Do you regularly let people know what the best way to do something is? When someone is telling their story, can you revel with them in their story? Or are you already thinking about your great story, prepping to share it? It is not proud. When you reflect on your accomplishments, your career accomplishments, or your ministry accomplishments, or your family accomplishments, does arrogance begin to sneak in? Do you find it hard to say you're sorry? Is it hard for you to be seen with people who are below your status, socioeconomically or in some other way? Do you avoid certain stores for the same reason, because of their lowbrow products and customers? It does not dishonor others. How do you treat people when they aren't around? What do you say about them? How do you speak about your spouse or your boss or your kids when they aren't around? Maybe your coworkers or your pastor. That's an important one. You should think about that. Conviction. It's not self-seeking. Maybe you need to evaluate your political interests. Is it all about you? Is it about your stuff, your rights, your money, your tax dollars? Or maybe it's all about what you can get from the system, what you can get from the politicians. It's about, my free health care or my free education or whatever else I can squeeze so that I can be raised up. Are you okay if your accomplishments go unrecognized? Do you find yourself thinking, what's in it for me? Even in relationships, are people a means to an end? Do you walk into a group and you see 10 people and suddenly you identify the 2 or 3 that you think will benefit you? So those are the relationships you're going to pursue, because now I get something out of it. It's not easily angered. When a coworker or a boss takes credit for your hard work, do you fly off the handle or do you simmer internally? Or how do you respond when someone makes an honest mistake? It keeps no record of wrongs. Is it hard for you to forgive? Or do you live by that motto? I don't get mad, I get even. Like in arguments, do you keep rehashing the past? You know, in the middle of an argument, do you finally blurt out, you know, you always do that. You always say those things. Are you bringing up the past in order to throw it on someone because you haven't let go of the wrongs? Are others happy that you're not God because of how tightly you cling to their wrongs? Love does not delight in evil, rejoices in the truth. Being able to speak the truth about sin and evil and hell. Always protects and trusts and hopes and also... So that is the beginning of your self-reflection assignment. So you get a sense of how to do this, right? And so now over the course of this week, my hope is take 5 minutes every day, maybe. Maybe take 20 minutes on a morning where you have a lot of time. And just work this exercise. Just go through it. It's so easy. We go through the scriptures, we read the Bible, we're like, oh, check mark. I did my thing. I read the Bible today. So now I've done my spiritual thing. You see, you're missing it. Let's let the Word of God seep in deep into the crevices of our soul. So take the time, write it out, reflect on it, and now this can become a worksheet for you. If you give it time and you develop it, it can be a worksheet for you that will allow you to figure out what your next steps would need to be. For instance, here are some next steps. We have to make decisions to love. Make decisions to love. Because it doesn't matter what great accomplishments that you have notched into your belt or what conquests are your bragging rights. It doesn't matter if you're a church leader or a vital volunteer. It doesn't matter if you're a gifted teacher or a reliable disciple maker, or if you're generous beyond belief. I give 10%. I give 30 grand. I give 40 grand a year to the church. We collected 1,700 backpacks. You know, we can log all of these great things that we do. But we have to remember that it does not matter. We need to make a decision to love each and every day. In fact, every moment throughout the day, to make a decision to love. That's why love goes so far beyond feelings. These good things are not ultimate things. The ultimate thing is a decision to love. And all of our lives will be judged by how well we love. And often we drop the ball. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell the person in front of you. I want you to lean forward. I want to whisper it. Maybe even say it. You don't have to whisper it. Just tell them. Just tell them right in their ear. You can tell them, you don't love me like you ought. Go ahead. Tell the person in front of you, you don't love me like you ought. Go ahead. Lean forward. Tell the person in front of you. You're telling me, you don't love me. That's right. Now turn to the person behind you and tell them, you don't love me like you ought. That's right. You don't love me like you ought. Now turn to the person on your one side and tell them, I don't love you like I ought. And now turn to the person on your other side and tell them, I don't love you like I ought. We have to make a decision to love. And we need to find people to love. This is important, vitally important. We need to find people to love. Now you can go in there and you take your self-reflection exercise, and there's all sorts of people and relationships that you're going to come across. If you do this intentionally, you're going to see areas where you've dropped the ball. Now you have areas where you can go work on things. You can now make a decision and find some people to love. And guys, listen, this is where your bromance comes in. So men, listen, you give yourself a Father's Day gift, okay? Give yourself a Father. This is one of the best Father's Day gifts you can ever give yourself. Ready? Here it is. Make a decision to find people to love. Make a decision. Go after those bromances. Find a few guys that you can invest in serious ways, and who will invest in you, who will become your life confidants, who will be able to hold you accountable and challenge you to grow in Christ. This is an amazing gift that you can give to yourselves, men. And then don't be overwhelmed, and this is so vitally important. When you go into this chapter, you'll see some great ideas here about seeing darkly and that which is perfect comes and all of that. And what he's trying to get at here is that the love that Paul is calling us to is not a natural thing. He knows that. We know that. We struggle in these areas because this is not natural human love. It's a love that comes from God. It comes from the Father, and it is rooted in the work of Jesus Christ on the cross, and it is in us and powerful in us through the work of the Holy Spirit. It is a triune effort. The Trinity is involved in the work of love in our hearts. This isn't human love. It has to go past that. And so we don't have to be overwhelmed when we fail to love the way we ought to. We don't have to be overwhelmed because Christ loves us and he forgives us. And he's promising to empower us, to give us both the humility and the courage to do what we ought to do in this world. So we don't have to be overwhelmed because we now have the love of Christ and we have the power of Christ, making this an ever-increasing reality. Paul tells us, when that which is perfect comes, that's the hope he gives us at the end of this chapter. When that which is perfect comes, everything else will be made right. We'll see clearly. We won't be children anymore. We won't struggle with love. There is one day when that which is perfect comes, when Christ returns and he takes us to be with the Father. Love will be the norm. It will be the way the world functions. It will be natural and right for every one of us then. You can imagine what it would be like for us to increasingly practice this as a community of faith, to be marked by this in increasing ways. But how loneliness could be banished and how friendships would no longer kind of trickle along in this shallow way that so many of us experience and are frustrated with. Imagine the kinds of sacrifices that would emerge from a congregation like this as each of us pursue. Sacrifice would be common in our midst. There would be hundreds of stories of self-sacrifice for the good of others. People would be beating the door down to be a part of a community like that. The soul hungers for it, and it's what he's calling us to. Would you guys pray with me? Lord, we're asking that you would make this more and more true of us. May we experience the conviction that comes through the Spirit as we study these things. May you give us the wisdom to reflect on them in very powerful ways so that we could see into the inner recesses of our hearts, expose them to the light, repent, turn to you, and fulfill this great challenge to love more perfectly each and every day. We pray it in Christ's name. Amen.